Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're going to take a look at some of the most powerful mafia families that are still active today. You won't believe the kind of power they have. Now let's jump right into it. The Gambino crime family. Now, don't be fooled by their unassuming name, because this family is anything but that. They're one of the 5 original mafia families from New York, and they've been around since the early 1900s. This family is based out of Brooklyn, and they control a lot of territory, including parts of Manhattan, Queens, and Long Island. They also have a strong presence in Florida and Nevada. Now, despite being one of the oldest and most established families, they keep a low profile and avoid drawing attention to themselves. They're really good at staying in the shadows and operating under the radar. But don't think for a second that they're not powerful. They are, and they're involved in all sorts of criminal activities, including gambling, loan sharking, extortion, and drug trafficking. Now, the current boss of the Gambino family is a mysterious figure known only as Big Paul, and no one knows who he is or where he is. But that just shows you how secretive and elusive these guys are. They always changing their leadership and evolving, so that they can continue to thrive and stay ahead of the law enforcement. And it's really impressive how well they've managed to keep their operations hidden. It's almost like they're ghosts. No one knows what they're doing, but everyone knows that they're there. So if you ever find yourself in one of their territories and you need some money, don't go to the Gambino crime family. It might seem like your best chance, but trust me, it's not worth the risk. The Lucchese crime family. Now, this is another one of the 5 original New York mafia families, and they were founded in the early 1900s. They're based out of Lower Manhattan and have a stronghold in the Garment District, which is fitting since the family name means the lucky ones in Italian. Talk about a fitting name. Now, they're renowned for being one of the most violent families, and they're not afraid to use force to get what they want. Back in the day, they were led by a guy named Lucky Luciano, who was one of the most ruthless mob bosses of all time. He helped to organize the first major crime conference in the U.S., and he brought together the biggest mob bosses from all over the country. But times have changed, and the Lucchese family is now led by a boss named Matthew Madonna. He's a really private person, and there's not much known about him, but he's definitely running the show. The Lucchese family is involved in a lot of illegal activities like gambling, extortion, and drug trafficking, and they make a lot of money from it. In fact, they're estimated to be worth billions of dollars. But if you try to get close to them, they'll shut you down fast. They were really protective of their secrets, and they'll do whatever it takes to keep their operations hidden. So if you want to stay safe, stay away from the Lucchese crime family. The Bonanno crime family. Now, this is another one of the 5 original New York mafia families, and they're known for being one of the most secretive and elusive. They were founded in the early 1900s and were originally led by a guy named Joseph Bonanno. Now, the family has been involved in some really nasty stuff over the years, like murders, extortion, and drug trafficking. And they're still active today. In fact, they're still involved in all those same activities, and they're still making a ton of money. Now, the boss of the Bonanno family is a guy named Joseph Massino, and he's the first Bonanno boss to ever cooperate with the government. He's given up his fellow mobsters to the authorities in exchange for a lighter sentence. Now, Massino is a really smart guy. He's actually an accountant by trade, and he used his skills to help launder money for the family. He's also really good at keeping secrets, which is why he was able to stay in charge of the family for so long. But even he couldn't keep the family's secrets forever. Eventually, he was caught, and he turned on his own family to save himself. The Bonanno crime family is definitely one to stay away from. They're dangerous, they're secretive, and they're not afraid to get their hands dirty. The Genovese crime family. This is another one of the 5 original New York mafia families, and they're known for being one of the most powerful and influential. They were founded in the early 1900s and were originally led by a guy named Vito Genovese. He was a really powerful mobster, and he helped to shape the mafia into what it is today. Now, the family has been involved in some really big-time stuff over the years, like murders, drug trafficking, and even political corruption. And they're still active today. They're still involved in all those same activities, and they're still making a ton of money. Now, the boss of the Genovese crime family is a guy named Matthew Ianiello, and he's been in charge since 2018. He's a really private guy and doesn't like to draw attention to himself. But that doesn't mean he's not powerful. He is. and he's running one of the most powerful crime families in the world. The Genovese crime family is definitely one to stay away from. They're dangerous, they're corrupt, and they're not afraid to use their power to get what they want. The Colomado crime family. Now, this is one of the most notorious crime families in history, and they're known for being one of the most violent and ruthless. They were founded in the early 1900s in New York, and they quickly became one of the most powerful families in the city. They were involved in all sorts of criminal activities, including murder, extortion, and drug trafficking. And they didn't care who they hurt in the process. They were led by a guy named Matty Colomado, and he was a real piece of work. He was responsible for some of the most brutal murders in Mafia history, and he wasn't afraid to take out anyone who crossed him. But eventually the government caught up with him, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Now, the Colombo crime family is still active today, but they're not as powerful as they once were. They're still involved in the same activities, but they just don't have the same level of violence that they once did. Now, the boss of the Colombo crime family is a guy named Benjamin Clinkscales, and he's been in charge since 2018. He's not as flashy as some of the other mob bosses, but he's just as dangerous. He's got a lot of enemies in the other crime families, and he's always on the lookout for a fight. If you cross the Colombo crime family, you're dead. There's no way out of it. They'll hunt you down, and they won't stop until you're dead. The Medici crime family. Now, this is a family you probably haven't heard of before, but they're just as dangerous as any of the other crime families I've told you about. They were founded in the early 1900s in Italy, and they quickly became one of the most powerful crime families in the country. They were involved in all sorts of criminal activities, including murder, extortion, and drug trafficking. They weren't afraid to use their power to get what they wanted. Now, the Medici crime family is still active today, but they've gone global. They're involved in criminal activities all over the world, and they've got a lot of money. They're not as violent as they once were, but they're just as dangerous. They've got a lot of enemies, and they're always on the lookout for a fight. You cross the Medici crime family, you're dead. It won't stop until you're dead. The Russian crime syndicate. Now, this is a crime syndicate that most people don't know about, but they're just as dangerous as any of the other crime families I've told you about. They were founded in the late 1900s in Russia, and they quickly became one of the most powerful crime groups in the country. They're not as secretive as the Italian mafia, but they're just as violent. If you mess with the Russian mafia, you're dead. They'll kill you without hesitation. Alright, comment below, which of these families was the most surprising to you? And don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this one. See you next time.